a feeling of admiration for what you both do to do the good things that you're aspiring to do, is to have dialogue and get people together. And so when you asked me to come to speak, which I am invited a lot of times to speak, and normally it's to talk about my sheriff's office, what it does, and I go through all of that, which, you know, after hearing about the 12th century and the 13th century, the beginning of the sheriff's office in this country in 1638 doesn't seem like it's got much history or much by way of roots at all. But I really applaud what you're doing. I think it's great. But when you asked me to speak on world peace, I didn't feel quite up to the task. Not that I do now. So I thought about it a lot, and not that I am cosmopolitan enough to address the many characteristics of the many varieties of people we have in the world, but I went the other way and took my own, growing up, my own area, the own little tiny part of the world where I grew up, as a microcosm of what the whole world is. And maybe I'll be able to get that point across, but picture how big the world is, and then picture your section where you grew up, and then picture the little parts of that area, and then the little sections off of that. So in my case, I thought the United States, that was about as much as we knew. There was the United States, and we knew there was a Japan and a Germany as little kids because of World War II. But we didn't know much about them. They were just out there somewhere. But what enables me maybe to relate to the job that you have about world peace, and I think the word that you all have mentioned to me most was dialogue, so you can communicate. Now, my mentor, like Rumi, by the way, it's his birthday. I didn't send him a card, but I saw that September 30th was his birthday. So somehow, I don't know if you observed that. I hope this is not the high point of his birthday. But when we grew up in Wilmington, now picture how small that is compared just to the country, and how small that is compared to the world. But we grew up in the city of Wilmington, and it was broken up into smaller sections by ethnicity. As you know, if you have any touch of history of the country, that when people came to this country, they settled together because they didn't have language capabilities. The Jewish people settled in New York, my Irish people settled in Boston, then the Germans were at other places. So when it got more of a mix, maybe this was maybe in the 1800s, and then we get to the 1900s, turn of the century, in my little area, which is probably like thousands of others, we had, in the western part of Wilmington, was our Irish area, and it was called the 40 acres. And we still dispute just why that is called that. And hundreds of us know the answer, which differs greatly from the other 100 people who know exactly why it's called 40 acres and the boundary of it, and we're all certain that we're right. That's part of my heritage. We are bullheaded, and we know that this ends here and it starts here. And then, as you go a little bit west in Wilmington from the 40 acres, you enter Little Italy. So, obviously, that's where the Italian people settled. And then, as you go a little bit southeast of there, you settle into the Polish area, which for reasons they all argue about, it's called Browntown. So you have this wave of the Irish, the Italian, and the Polish, and then as you got more into the center part of our city, it was where the black guys grew up. And then as you went up north, forming a circle around the city, in the north part, the Jewish guys lived. Now this all predates the Latino infusion, because we didn't really know anything about it, because there weren't any Latino people in measure enough to have a population in Wilmington. So the thinking now, you have to forgive the thinking that we had as kids. And see, I grew up just after World War II. I almost said one, but that was not right. So we had our little boundary where we lived. And even when you hear the adults talking, they would say something about, well, they're Italian, you know, with some kind of, or they're Polish, or, you know, they're the Jews, or the black guy. And it was steeped in enough ignorance that I wouldn't call my parents ignorant, or my family ignorant in its strictest sense, because they, ignorant is a denigrating term, but they just didn't know because they just didn't know. They just thought it was us and them. Now, that has, fortunately, through the warmth of education, has thawed out that iceberg of ignorance. But back then, other people were referred to by denigrating nicknames, like the Polacks, like the dumb Polak thing. That was the Polish people, and there was no reason to call somebody that. But black people were called niggers, and the Italians right near us, it was the Guineas or the Wops. And then you had, even when you referred to the World War II, it was the Japs and the Krauts being the Germans. And the Jews they had a lot of different names. They didn't like the Jews because they had money and they seemed to be successful. They were disliked for another reason. So you disliked without knowing. And you had these nicknames, and then to show the thaw had not completely warmed, when the Latino people came in, they were referred to as spics. So you have these denigrating, nasty, now non-acceptable terms that we grew up with and didn't see anything wrong with as you were playing with the ball out in the street with your fellow 8-year-olds. And my blessing was having my own hero in the form of my father. He seemed to be above that and was a father figure in our Irish community. Not that he had an official title, but he would coach basketball and he would talk with some of our Catholic priests, some of our fellow parents about problems they might have, and he had a way of trying to communicate with our Irish people. As much as we basically are the same, I think a lot of us have characteristics that make us who we are, that we're not proud of it. And the Irish people